The views, information, or opinions expressed in this episode are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the University of Hawaii, College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resilience, our funders, or any of the organizations affiliated with this project. Welcome to a Seeds of Wellbeing Experts in the Field podcast featuring Hawaiʻi agriculture producers and affiliates working in their field of expertise to support agriculture in Hawaii, in the United States, and in some cases around the world. These podcasts are made possible by a grant from the University of Hawaii College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resilience, also known as CTAHR, and the Seeds of Wellbeing or SOW project, and is supported by a grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and the Hawaii Department of Agriculture.
Well, one of the keys that to our foundation's mission is to support collaborative leadership. And so sometimes you don't always see, people don't necessarily stand up when they're leading. So that's one of the things that we like to honor, and maybe it's part of Hawaii's style too, not the nail not sticking up too high. So, but we're pleased to host the conference.
What am I working towards if I'm not trying to help Hawaii return to those inherent values that we had even prior to Western contact, before we were part of this global system, in order for us to not be so vulnerable in the face of a pandemic or a natural disaster? Even our keynote speakers yesterday, the keynote panel, they were talking about this idea of building abundance again. And so there's these threads that are being woven throughout this agricultural community that we all have to have some kind of a shared vision in order to have enough food for everybody.
When we attended the 2024 Hawaiʻi Agriculture Conference on Oahu, we noticed that the name Agricultural Leadership Foundation of Hawaii figured prominently, so we decided to find out more about it. In this episode, we speak with Board President Diane Ley about the history and vision of ALFHawaiʻi, how and why ALFH started and continues the Hawaiʻi Ag Conference every 2 years, and details about their 14-month agricultural leadership program, from Diane, but also from Molly Mamaril, a recent graduate we spoke with at the conference. This time with us we have Diane Ley, who's the president of the board of the Agricultural Leadership Foundation of Hawaii. So welcome, Diane.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, so part of why I reached out to you, and I thought it might be interesting to the Hawaii Ag producer community, is I attended this year the biennial agriculture conference on Oahu. As for some reason this year, I really noticed Ag Leadership Foundation's involvement in a big way. I don't know if that was just me not noticing before, or if you've stepped it up. But if you kind of give us a sense of ALF's role and with the Ag Conference and how that evolved. I think it's been kind of a heavy involvement since about 2008 from what I read on your website. But maybe just give us a sense of ALFHawaiʻi and how that's connected to the Ag Conference and how that all came about.
Sure. Well, let me step back a little bit further and just share with you the Agricultural Leadership Foundation of Hawaii is a nonprofit, a 501c3 educational nonprofit, established in 1982, and there were 5 visionaries, all from Hawaii Island, but they were meeting together and they said, we're having some transition in the agriculture industry as a whole. The sugar and pineapple plantations are starting to, consolidate. Some of them are shutting down. It looks like more of them will be coming online to shut down. And with that is creating a vacuum with leadership opportunities through the corporate model. And it's also creating an opportunity for smaller agribusinesses to step in and access land and water and start growing their businesses and their markets. But with that comes a need for some skill sets that are beyond production, beyond marketing. It's the leadership components, how we do business together, how we network, how we collaborate, how we speak up when we need support from government to change laws, to change policies, to put resources towards building our business model in a new fashion, which again was more small and diversified than had been going on for about 100 years. So the founders put together a nonprofit. They got a significant grant from the Kellogg Foundation, and that was allow them to launch this multi-month set of leadership training modules.
Was there something significant that happened, like that caused that the Ag Leadership Foundation to step up and say the conference really needs to be maybe 2008 is, I'm not sure how long the conference was happening before 2008, or did you help found it, or did you step up and say we have to help fill a role, because that would be helpful?
Yes, yes. Yes, the foundation board was considering a couple things. One was, how do we move beyond just doing cohort classes with the agricultural leadership program? How do we reach a broader audience? And how do we also collaborate with some of the key players, such as CTAHR, the Hawaii Farm Bureau, Hawaii Department of Agriculture? And the concept was, oh, why don't we get together and do an educational conference? And so that was actually in 2002. So I need to update the website. And we did it several years, I think 3 years in a row, in collaborating. And we said, wow, this is a lot of work to put together 2 days of conference. So we stepped back and we moved to every other year. And so the foundation has been at the helm, leading the process. We added executive director and other staff over the years. And so that allowed the foundation to become the primary host for the conference, with, continued support when other organizations and entities are able to, step in and help us with program planning, as well as, some of the other components behind the scene, managing the administrative details it takes to put together a conference. So we've been a proud sponsor or host for the conference. It takes us about a year with a planning team, doing surveys throughout the industry. What are people interested in? What are the key topics? And then settling down on a theme to focus on. And we try to be a bit edgy with that, but also relevant, and then build sessions around that. This past year, we kind of honed our 2 days. Day one was more policy focused, big picture, and then day two was more boots on the ground, something that, producers and CTAHR agents and other collaborators can take back and put to use quickly on the farm, ranch. So,
Okay.
so that's kind of the nexus of it.
Yeah. So for me to try to summarize, it sounds like Ag Leadership Foundation has been part of and kind of critical to the ag conferences that were initially annual and then became biennial.
Yes.
2 years around. Maybe that's what the 2008 was that I was referring to. In 2008, we had switched to biennial, and so always been integrated or key to the success and the production of those ag conferences every year.
We have, and I think one of the reasons why you mentioned that maybe you didn't notice it before. Well, one of the keys that to our foundation's mission is to support collaborative leadership. And so sometimes you don't always see, people don't necessarily stand up when they're leading. So that's one of the, things that we like to honor, and maybe it's part of Hawaii's style too, not the nail not sticking up too high. So, but we're pleased to host the conference.
Nice. Yeah. And I did have the opportunity to speak to one of the graduates of this cohort, just recently graduated. Actually, I think the graduation ceremony was perhaps at the conference itself.
Yes, it was.
And I did speak to one of your graduates from this most recent cohort. So I'll tie that in too to the podcast here. But we thought it would be great to get your perspective as board president and administratively, just to give a sense of the complete picture of Ag Leadership Foundation. So I thank you for that. So program, it sounds like it started with the leadership program. Is that what I was hearing?
Did.
And that was
yes.
which Molly, who we spoke with at the conference, who's the recent grad, just went through. So tell us more about the program and how that came and how that was founded and structured and maybe has evolved over the years.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So the program is our signature training program. We're typically looking for about every other year, because the program that runs about 14 months long. And we're typically looking for folks that are they have delved into some type of leadership within their community, within their agricultural organizations, commodity organizations, or marketing organizations. They've been stepping up a little bit. They're not quite sure where they're going or how they're going. It might be within their corporate business, but that's the type of typically it's a younger person, but it's not necessary. We've had some senior folks in the cohorts as well, and they've added a lot. But what we're looking for is some folks that are interested in learning more, developing their skill sets so that they can contribute more to the agricultural sector of Hawaii, as well as our rural communities. We have an application process, and then a set of reviews of those applications by staff, as well as alumni from prior cohorts. And then we select the class. Typically, it's about 10 to 12 folks, and we ask them to commit for, as I mentioned, up to 14 months of training. And this is typically they're typically about 4 days at a time. They'll come together. They'll visit all of the islands in Hawaii. They'll be spending time out in a field, meeting with different producers, learning about different agricultural systems, how agriculture interacts with our economic activities throughout the state, how it interacts with our landscapes, our natural environment, as well as our diversity of communities. They'll spend some time with state leaders, both of the legislature, State Department of Agriculture, CTAHR, as well as other, federal resources, talking about different topic areas. And again, kind of just broadening that perspective and understanding. The class also spends quite a bit of time in developing their leadership skills, and those are focused on communications, strategic planning, strategic thinking, collaborative leadership, and as well as strategic facilitation. And all of those are intended to, build their confidence and understanding of the agricultural sector and what role you can play in it. I should say also that the class, in addition to spending time throughout the state of Hawaii, they get to spend a week in Washington, D.C., where they go to meet with congressional members from Hawaii, This last class, they spent time with congressional members, staff from the state of Vermont, as well as a day at actually 2 days at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And so again, they're exposed to not only lawmaking, policy development, policy implementation, and so in total, the class is spending about 35 to 40 days, together, developing their understanding and their skill sets. They also form a pretty unique bond amongst the classes generally. And so once the class graduates, I think what our expectation as a foundation is that it's kind of like children, that they'll go out, they'll do good, they'll do great things, both with respect to maybe their businesses, as well as the broader agricultural community and their communities as a whole. So that's the expectation, and in a nutshell, what we cover.
Yeah. So just what's the financial and time commitment that you ask from the folks that are in your cohort?
Generally, it's about 35 to 40 days. The cost for the program is about $6,500 for the cohort member. We do offer some scholarships based on need, and we also encourage participants that either to seek funding through their business if they work for a company, or to go out and ask for others that might want to support them.
Okay. Yeah, and I also noticed, I think it was on your website that, of course, I'll have links in the show notes, but I think I saw that there was a congressional debrief report that was put together by this cohort, and perhaps every cohort is required to. So that I thought was pretty interesting. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Well, one of the intents when the class does go to Washington, D.C., we're trying to provide a unique experience for each cohort. We want to ensure that the class is learning through the process of going there. We don't hand them curriculum and say, here, this is what you need to learn. What we want them to do is we want the class to sit down with each other, either as a whole group or as subcommittees, and figure out what are some of the key issues that the federal government can impact in their livelihoods, in agriculture as a whole in Hawaii. What is it they can do, and what is the federal government not doing? And so so we asked the class to explore that. The last class used the Hawaii Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, the CEDS, for 2023 through, I think it was 27. And they cherry-picked out priority issues, and that, again, might be relevant not so much to implementation in the state of Hawaii or the counties, because that's what the CEDS strategy focus is, on the county and state level, but how could the counties and states partner back with the federal government? So so that's what they cherry picked out, and came up with the areas of land affordability, equitable access to water, infrastructure, housing for agriculture, and then also access from the farm to state programs. So, but in the past, some of the classes have focused on the Jones Act, the law that addresses our shipping requirements, that we have to have American flag ships coming into Hawaii. Some of them have focused on export of product. Some of them have focused on biosecurity. So,
yeah, some of the ranchers I've spoken to in Hawaii certainly mentioned the Jones Act of having a huge impact on their
Yeah.
ability or lack of ability to be profitable and efficient in Hawaii. So I think we could probably talk about the Jones Act for a while.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So again, yeah, the concept is for the class to do their homework on what are, relevant topics that could be discussed with, congressionals or the administration on the mainland.
Nice. And hopefully make some progress, right? I think.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because some people, really, there's not a lot of exposure in most of the classes to Washington, D.C. And I've seen cohort members who were really, I thought of them as leaders in their community or their business and their organization. And yet they say, oh, I'm so nervous to go there. They have to wear suits with a tie, the guys, and, women have to dress professionally. And so, yes. So, I think that exposure is really good. It also really resonates with some people, and some people don't like it at all. They say, well, that's enough. I don't want to do that. The class also spends a few days over at our state legislature doing the same, type of work, understanding the process for bill making, and then shadowing legislators, meeting with legislators, as well as going into hearings. And some people put more effort into it. I've, one of the cohort members I can think of a number of years back, he got 3 or 4 bills passed within 2 years of graduating from the program because he realized where he could make a difference.
Wow, that's
So,
great.
yeah.
That's great. Do you track your alum and the progress they make and kind of keep data about what they're doing and what kind of impacts in the ag community?
We do. Yeah, it's a pretty broad diversity. We have probably about 220 grads now in the program. Some have passed away since we've been around for a while. Some have retired. Some have nothing to do with agriculture anymore, and some of them are just going gangbusters. They won't ever retire, so they're just fully committed to agriculture in Hawaii. So yeah, we try to connect with people. We do have a newsletter that comes out several times a year, and we try to highlight usually at least one member that or a cohort that is doing something neat, or has some new business opportunity or addition to their family. So yeah.
Nice. Any names you want to drop?
Oh gee.
Yeah, put you on the spot. You don't have to.
No, I can't think of any.
We can check through the newsletters on your website. Right?
Yeah, sure.
Actually, are the newsletters available to anyone, or is it only to your?
They're posted on our website, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, yeah, I saw one. I wasn't sure if they were all there.
Yeah, yeah. If not, it'd be a good thing to add.
Yeah. I saw there's a youth program as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll call it a light program. The foundation has always tried to be supportive of our youth. And when I speak of youth, I mean folks that are in students that are in high school or intermediate school. We've worked with the FFA, Future Farmers of America. Some of the schools have that program. Some of them just have an ag program. So we stay in touch with the leadership, some of the lead teachers, as well as FFA. And we're always available to help them when, if they need speakers, they need judges for their student contests. They need a few dollars to, bring students together. So that's one of the ways we've tried to be supportive. The other way we have been able to reach out pretty successfully is including students in the Hawaiʻi Agriculture Conference every other year. We provide scholarships for them, bus stipends, some air, and we've also, I think it's been 3 of the conferences, we've had the students lead the day 2 keynote, and they frame the subject and they present, and yeah, have a growing audience. You know, sometimes it's hard on day 2 to get people, you know, to show up early. And yet I think the adults are in the room are very much appreciative of our youth and, you know, want to support them and encourage them. So
Yeah,
it's nice.
nice spin on the usual keynote too. That's nice.
Yeah. Yes.
So how did you become involved? What's your how did you find all this?
Well, I was a farmer a long time ago. And I saw in the Hawaii Tribune Herald, a little Hilo newspaper, an article about the first class of the Ag Leadership Program. And I said, wow, this looks really interesting. I want to sign up. But I didn't have the $2,000 to, you know, pay my tuition. So okay, dream on. So 7 cohorts later, I was able to jump into the class. I got a lot out of it, both, again, you know, the exposure to statewide issues, to concerns, to opportunities. And I came away with this huge toolbox of, you know, leadership skills that I could put to work in my day-to-day work, because I was involved in my community. I was involved with, I was at that time working for the Hawaii Farm Bureau. I was working for a Main Street program, and all of these all fit together in economic development, in connecting with people and networking. And so I was just thrilled with it. So when the opportunity came to serve on the board, I stepped up and I served as a board member for a number of years. I have been on the executive board, you know, in different roles, as the secretary, as the vice president, and as the president. So just kind of rotate around as needed. We normally have a board of, you know, about 10 people, and it fluctuates a little bit. Most board members are on board for maybe 4 to 5 years, some longer, some like myself have been around longer. And we just kind of, you know, at some point you almost function as a historian, and but you're always wanting to bring along, you know, folks that are new to the organization and younger folks. So take the leadership helm.
And
It's all about collaborating.
Yep. Well, that's the theme, right? That's part of the theme of the conference too, if I
Yes.
recall.
Yes.
So is it the board, or do you have staff that put together the conference, or how does that all come into play?
Yeah. So the staff are the nuts and bolts, the admin portion, the registration, the facilities, the pulling together all the financing and overseeing the communications piece. So we have 1.5 time staff that do that. We have a couple contractors, but they're not significant roles. And then the rest, but the content itself, the theme and the program itself is led by a planning team. And it's this past year, it was board members. In the past, we've involved other people who've stepped forward and said they were interested, whether they're from other organizations like CTAHR or Hawaii Farm Bureau. It just depends, you know, when folks step up and want to participate. The planning team does not get paid. So, you know, it's a labor of love, but it's an opportunity for individuals to, you know, work together as a team and really kind of stretch, because we want the conference to be a stretch. We want it to be, again, a little bit edgy or a little bit dynamic, and you know, have aha moments for folks, you know. And so we put together the theme and then some track areas, you know, looking again, what is relevant, what's new, what's blossoming, what could be if we brought people together, and kind of working through it. It takes quite a while. Our staff gets frustrated sometimes because we don't stick with their calendar. But then, you know, by summer, you know, or 3 months out before the conference, we start really kind of pulling it together. We have identified topic areas. And then we go reach back out into the community and they say, hey, you're a leader in this area. Could you help pull together a panel of speakers, or could you be the sole speaker? We don't do too many of those, but, could you, offer your mana'o in helping us to further organize this, moderate a panel. And then we have kind of a formula for bringing the speakers together, make sure we get their bios and their PowerPoints, if you will. So, and it all kind of rolls together right at the conference.
You've been doing it a few years now, so I imagine you have some things that work. And I think technology has evolved certainly since you started all this. And I know there's an app the past 2 conferences that I've noticed you're starting to use too. So but tell me, were you able to attend the 2024 conference?
I was.
Yeah,
I actually went to sessions this time. Normally I get involved in other components of the conference, but so I was able to.
You're a participant this time, didn't have to running around trying to take care of things. How do you think it went? What was your feeling?
Really well. I mean, it's always interesting to watch it unfold. We were really pleased with the participation level. Over 650 folks came again. And watching the sessions unfold and where people's interests are is always, it's a challenge to figure out where that's going to be, and then to see that you're able to meet it. Some of the numbers drop off, and particularly on day 2, and you're like, well, where did the people go? So it's kind of one of those questions you kind of keep muddling in your mind, and then you say, well, next time, do we just do a day and a half? Do we just do 1 day? It's, lots of trade-offs there. So
yeah, work in process. I guess it always evolves, right? If you're doing it right.
Yes.
So yeah, I did speak to one of the egg producers there, also from the Big Island like me, and he made a comment that I thought I would just run by you, which is he said he was told by a number of folks at the conference that they were surprised to find a real farmer, as he called it, actually showed up. So I don't know if you want to talk to like what percent of quote unquote real farmers or ag producers show up, and what is that, what's the design or what's the goal from your perspective?
Yeah. So I'd have to go back and check the actual data, but I want to say probably just under 20% as our producers. And that's a challenge. It's, we'd love to have it be all producers, but then the agricultural sector is not all producers. It's, there's the folks that support agriculture through education, through business and policy, through shipping, through providing containers, through let's see, what else is there? The whole diversity of the sector. And so while we'd like to have all producers there, for us to put together 2 days worth of content that meets the needs of the diversity of producers, whether they be row crops or aquaculture or cattle or orchids, the content would be just too broad. So what we try to do with the conference is provide a higher level of overview of what's going on in the sector, what touches different people, whether it be labor, whether it be new market opportunities. I'm going to step way back and use an example of one year. Our keynote was a guy from Canada who was doing internet marketing. And people were like, their socks were blown off in the room. They were just amazed. They were like, wow, what is this? You can go on the computer and sell your stuff? No. So yeah, that's a while ago, but dim history for, but so yeah, so we try to get big enough and broad enough that where there's exposure to policy issues, to market trends, to initiatives that might make a difference to a broader portion of the sector. So then you end up with policymakers coming, you end up with folks from CTAHR, educators, people who touch agriculture every day and who may touch directly with producers through their associations, through the out on the farm or ranch, and can share ideas and also help develop programs, whether they be educational programs or policy or new, markets. So that type of exposure, it's a little different, but that's what we do. So this past conference, day one was, we tried to keep it high level policy focused, and day two was more boots on the ground. What are the mechanics of an application to a group of producers?
Yeah, and I think maybe you've done this before, but in the past two conferences, I noticed Go Farm actually has a morning breakfast networking for their alum. And this year, this past conference, you combined that with your ag leadership program alum, their graduates. So that certainly had an energy to it that was palpable, I think. And that kind of young, excited, just out of a cohort kind of group of people were there, and a lot of excitement in that room. I actually did some video when I was there that for the video version of the podcast here. I may share some of that for this podcast, just so people get a sense of kind of what the Ag Conference is about. I feel like you and others that are offering discounts try to make it affordable for sure for the conference. So I did notice that looked like you're trying to draw more people in. I know
we do offer producer sponsorship, scholarships, yes. Travel stipends.
And Go Farm offers a discount as well, which is nice. And so I think the podcast is geared towards, this podcast from Seeds of Wellbeing is geared towards the Hawaiʻi Ag producers and trying to find ways to make their lives simpler, less stressful.
Right.
So any words of wisdom you want to share related to our Hawaiʻi Ag community, related to what you folks do and how that might be helpful?
Sure. Yeah. For producers, I think sometimes you can, depending on how big your business is, you can feel pretty alone out there. And I think that, getting involved in whether it be the Agricultural Leadership Foundation of Hawaii or the Agricultural Leadership Program, or your organization that, whether you be a flour producer, cattleman, aquaculture, getting involved in your networks, really, I think that builds that community, which is so important to us as a whole and overall. And you can, explore your skill sets within a group. You can contribute. The more you contribute, the more you get out of it, I believe. It builds your confidence, it builds your network, it builds business opportunities, it builds a better community. So I encourage everybody to jump in and get involved.
Now that we've heard all about the Agricultural Leadership Foundation of Hawaii and its programs, let's hear from Molly, a recent graduate of the most recent cohort of the Agriculture Leadership Program. We met Molly at the 2024 Agriculture Conference.
My name is Molly Mamaril, and I'm a cohort member in the Agricultural Leadership Program, Class 18. And in my day job, I work with Oahu Economic Development Board, which is a local nonprofit.
Sounds like they would tie together nicely.
They do, although not everybody sees the connection right away, but seeing how the agriculture sector has so much potential, and it's already such a big network, and these conferences are incredibly helpful to see what everybody else is doing. And for me, coming from an economic development perspective, I'm learning so much, and it's really humbling to be new to this area. And so being part of the cohort has very much opened my eyes to how to be a better consumer, how to support local businesses better, how to support farmers better, just as like a Hawaii resident, not even necessarily in my role at work, but the program has been the best professional development program that I've ever been part of.
Wow. And it sounds like quite the accolades. Have you been through other programs like it? Or?
Nothing like this before.
Yeah.
It was 14 months of seminars, visiting, I think 4 or 5 islands, and producers on every island, food innovation centers. We visited all the organizations that distribute food, transport food. We learned about dairies and marketing and everything in between. So I feel like I see things in the food system differently than I used to.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you do podcasting, so you won't mind if I check my podcasting equipment while we speak, will you? Nope. Just want to make sure our recording levels are good.
I get it.
Of course, we can edit things out, too,
Yeah.
that we don't want. But I'm curious, what inspired you to sign up for the program?
It's funny how that happened. One of my colleagues had been an alumni of the program, and she worked with me at our nonprofit. We attended the Ag Conference 2 years ago, and I learned so much. And I remember seeing I believe it was the last cohort graduating, and my colleague was like, Molly, when the application opens up, you should consider putting your name in and just seeing if, maybe this is something you could learn about ag. And when the application came out later, she's like, here it is, just if you have the time and interest, submit an application. And I did, not really realizing like what an awesome opportunity it was to just be in this cohort with people from all different parts of agriculture and the food system in Hawaii. So it was kind of unexpected, but I think that's also in many ways a testament to what they're trying to do with the program, is get people from different sectors connected so that everything in our ag sector can become more connected because we have this deeper network.
And is it hard to get into the program? Like, do you feel like you're lucky that you got in because of the competition for applicants, or is it easy to get into, or do you have a sense of that?
I feel very lucky to be part of the program. I know that every cohort is slightly different, and I remember during the application process they talked about how depending on the pool of applicants, they might they might design the program slightly differently based on the background of those who apply. If it was like all producers or all people who work in food hubs. I mean, I can't speak to their decision-making process, but they did say depending on the pool of applicants, they might design the experiences differently.
Oh, perfect.
So I guess it depends on the year how difficult it is to get in, depending on everyone's individual background.
Maybe UH, maybe Harvard.
I don't know. But I love my cohort members.
How many folks in the cohort?
There are 12 of us total in class 18.
Is that what they limited to, do you know, or that's what it turned out to?
That's what it turned out to be for this particular class.
Nice. You've been to a number of islands, you've seen a number of places, a variety of what's going on in Hawaiʻi Ag. Who want to drop some names? Like, what are some of the places you've gone, or some of the folks that you've met?
I remember on Hawaii Island, we visited Greenpoint Nurseries, and that was really inspiring to see a family business that is so tied into the community. And I know that they're present here at the conference as well. We visited, I think, over 100 organizations across the state, and I think on our national trip. We visited so many farms, and
I'll put you on the spot. I know.
I'm thinking of like the
It's not a test. It's not your final test for graduation.
I know.
How do you think you'll use your degree or what you've learned here?
It's exciting to see what's possible. Having this professional development experience and this network that we've been exposed to and that we've created with our cohort, the way I would like to use it, and I think my cohort members will agree, is we want to stay connected. And we're on different islands in different pockets of the ag community. And we already have projects that we want to work on together, or, move the needle on different things that are needs and gaps within the ag sector. And we know that we're just learning still. We're getting our feet wet. We're kind of like, many of us are mid-career. I still feel a little bit like I'm early career, especially in ag, because this is not my background. Though I did have a background in conservation prior to economic development. When we visited Washington, D.C. and met with our Hawaii congressional delegation, as well as USDA and Farm Bureau, we wrote a white paper on highlighting 4 priorities that our cohort selected to kind of share with our delegation. And those came from the Hawaii Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. So it's a statewide sail plan or vision of where different industry clusters, industry sectors can go. And there's an agriculture, aquaculture, and food systems action plan within that development strategy. And so knowing that those were our 4 priorities, focusing on food access, land access, water infrastructure, it just became so much more obvious to us what our priorities are. And I think to use our experience successfully, it would be to make progress on some of those priorities and anything that comes up as a need that maybe we could help influence. But,
right.
Again, we're just starting out.
Yes, trying to move the needle, as you said. Of all the needles that can be moved, what needle gets you up in the morning and inspires you the most?
That's a big question.
Don't think about it too much. Come from the heart.
This isn't necessarily an economic development priority, that's
We won't
laid
tell your
out
boss.
on laid out in our white paper. But I think in my day-to-day work, working in economic development, I've had really wonderful mentors who have always brought it back to what is best for the people of Hawaii. What do the people of Hawaii want and need to thrive? And how do we rebuild a thriving economy grounded in the values of aloha?
May I challenge you on something?
Of course.
Who are the people of Hawaii?
Yeah, who is our community? It's people who are dedicated to this place. The people who are committed to Hawaii. Whether you're born and raised here or you've lived here for a long time. Those who want Hawaii to be healthy and well in all senses of abundance, not just the financial sense or what they can get from Hawaii, but rather looking at those multiple forms of capital. How can Hawaii have more social capital, environmental capital, spiritual and cultural capital? So the people who are invested in building that prosperity model.
We've talked to the legislature and folks like Senator Tim Richards. And Tim, and as I heard yesterday in one of the panels, right, Tim and some of the legislators, other senators and representatives have to educate and themselves be educated. And part of why they're here is to become educated, but that's a very small percentage, a small minority of the folks in political power. Tim on our podcast said that there are people that don't agree we need to be sustainable and self-sufficient. They say, that's not the focus anymore. And so it's a battle, right? And I think, but my sense is you think that battle is winnable.
I think personally I have to feel that way, that what am I working towards if I'm not trying to help Hawaii return to those inherent values that we had even prior to Western contact, before we were part of this global system. in order for us to not be so vulnerable in the face of a pandemic or a natural disaster. Even our keynote speakers yesterday, the keynote panel, they were talking about this idea of building abundance again. And so there's these threads that are being woven throughout this agricultural community that we all have to have some kind of a shared vision in order to have enough food for everybody and be able to live without being so dependent on everyone else doing their part to support us. And I can't remember who said it yesterday, but they shared, the local food system didn't crash during the pandemic. It was the national one that did not help us here in Hawaii because we're so isolated and dependent on things being delivered to us. But the local food system, we can pivot and move and get things between islands and so forth. So that was really encouraging to hear, and it was obvious, all the CSAs, their sales shot through the roof. Everyone was trying to support local businesses during that time because we're all okay, where do we go from here? We need food, but we didn't have toilet paper. that was what they said. So the food system, there's potential here.
Nice. I think the cowbell in the background is telling us that we should probably wrap it up because this morning's keynote, I think, is supposed to start. But really appreciate your time. I appreciate your passion and hope. You have hope, which I think is key, and I think that's why a lot of us are here for these 2 days, is to feed our hope.
We thank Diane and Molly for sharing their mana'o and the story of the Agricultural Leadership Foundation of Hawaii and the Hawaiʻi Agriculture Conference. We hope this gives you some insights into the Ag Conference as well as ALFH's leadership programs and how they may benefit you in your efforts to help feed the islands. Mahalo.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And thanks for sharing some about the program. It's interesting. So I'll put links about where people can sign up. If you want to put in a plug for the Economic Development Board, anything you want to say and that would encourage our Hawaiʻi ag producers, farmers and ranchers about what the vision is for your job description?
Oh yeah, I think a resource that people might find helpful is to lean on the Hawaii Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, and it's available online. Just
at
look up.
www.
Oh, it's on.
You can send me a link.
I'll send you a link, and people can leverage that the SEDS in grant applications and tie it back to the priorities that the industry sectors highlighted, showing that maybe their organization is really focused on water infrastructure or building more value-added innovation centers. So yeah, leaning on the SEDS as a resource can help bring more funding into our state. And so it's there for people to use.
Great. Thanks again.
Thank you, Jim.
The intention of these podcast series is to create a safe space for respectful and inclusive dialogue with people from across a broad and diverse spectrum involved in growing and making accessible the food we share together. A diversity of voices, perspectives, and experiences can serve to deepen mutual understanding, to spark creative problem solving, and provide insight into the complexities of our agricultural system. If you or listeners have experiences with Hawaii agriculture ecosystem, from indigenous methods, permaculture, smallholder farmers, to large, including multinational agricultural industrial companies, and everywhere in between, and you would like to share your story, please contact us. We welcome your voices and perspectives.